What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I have an interesting computer before us today, and by looking at it, we're going to be taking a step back in time. Now, I started making YouTube videos over 15 years ago now, back in late 2009, and it's not exactly this channel. I had one channel before this one that I started in February of 2010, but regardless, I was 12 years old at the time, and I was in 6th grade. And one of the hottest things in the computer world back then, keep in mind this is before the iPad was released in June of 2010, were netbooks. And they were essentially very small, very low cost, low power laptops, and their main purpose was just for browsing the internet. And this is one of them. This is a Dell Latitude 2100, and I bought this on eBay a few days ago because I have very fond memories of it from back then. Now, back in 2010, late 2009, early 2010, I was in 6th grade, and my computer class at the time had a whole fleet of these at my school, and I just thought these were the coolest thing ever. Now, I also had some other netbooks at the time. I remember having an Acer Aspire 1 and an HP Mini for a short time back then, but I always liked these because they were a little bit different. Now, you may notice that this does not look as standard as some of those other netbooks at the time. Dell designed this mainly for the education market, but they also marketed it towards business professionals. And you'll notice, besides the cool blue color, is that it is a very ruggedized, thick, and sturdy netbook, and of course it's part of the Latitude line, so you'd come to expect that. But this is a very stark difference in terms of form factor compared to the other netbooks at the time, which were not really designed for business use. So, like I said, Dell designed this for the education market primarily, and I think that's most people that ended up buying it. But they also marketed this towards business professionals so they could use it as a second laptop to kind of take notes during a meeting. I'm not really sure how many people did that, but there it is. You'll also notice something peculiar on the lid about it, and that is this little bar at the top. And what this is an LED light, and this lights up when the computer is using the internet, when network activity is occurring. And I think the idea for this was to make sure that your students in the classroom were on task and they weren't, going away from the curriculum. But that's what that is. If we look around at the ports, like I said, you'll notice that this thing is very thick. If we look at the ports, you can see we have a Kensington lock here. There's one on either side. Now that's quite useful for a school environment, I would think. We also have a VGA port, a vent for the heatsink. We have a USB port here, probably 2.0. I don't think USB 3 really took off, especially not at this price point yet. We have a headphone and a microphone port. And then if we move around to the front, you can see we have some status LEDs, one for system power, hard drive activity, battery / charging, and network activity. We have two very terrible speakers. These things suck, but they're there. We also have a full-size SD card reader, which I believe is pretty standard for the time. Going around the right side, we just have two more USB ports and a gigabit Ethernet port. We also have the Dell 20-volt barrel jack. They used this for the better part of 20 years, and this was kind of right in that era. And I believe they were using this up until like 5-6 years ago on some machines, so that's interesting. If we go around the back, you'll see we just have the battery. This is the extended battery. I believe most of these came like this, but I believe you could also get a very smaller 2 or 3 cell battery, I'm going to guess, that doesn't stick out like this and have it elevated like a stand. But most of them came with this battery, and then you'll notice also that it does have this clear protector thing on it, and I believe this comes off, and you can put like labels or something like that in here, so you can number it maybe for a computer lab or put a student's name on it, something like that. So there's that, kind of different. And then if we go towards the bottom, same ruggedized or rubberized rugged finish. And then we also have a Windows Vista product key, which you can have. I really don't care. And then we just have the battery latch there. So that's the exterior of the machine. Let's go ahead and open it up real quick. It looks a little more standard on the inside. There's not too much, peculiar about it. But we do have a very small screen here. I believe this is a 10-inch screen. 10 or 11, I'm not too sure. We have a blanking plate for a webcam up here, which was optional on this model. And then if we go down towards the bottom here, you'll see that we just have the Latitude 2100 branding. Then we have some volume controls over here, power button on the right side, and then some keyboard indicators. Speaking of the keyboard, it's not horrible. It is not exactly full size, but the keys are a little bit larger than I would expect on a machine like this. A lot of other netbooks had smaller, crappier keys than this, so that's not terrible. But what is terrible is the touchpad. You can see my hand for scale here. This thing is tiny. I mean, I can cover the whole thing with 2 fingers. It's not very good, but I imagine that that's really all they could afford to put there. So there's that. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. I tried to charge the battery up a couple of days ago, but it is pretty smoked. I don't think it's going to last us too long. So let's go ahead and just plug it in, and I will turn it on for you guys. Go and adjust the camera a little bit here, and we will boot it up. So a lot of these machines, of course, came with Windows Vista Basic, Windows 7 Starter later in the product cycle, but I decided to put full Windows 7 Home Premium on here, Service Pack 1. Of course, a big limitation of the starter editions of Windows is you could only run a couple of apps at a time, and they also didn't have Windows Aero Glass support, which this machine does support. The very antiquated Intel 945 integrated graphics in this machine does support Windows Aero, but yeah, there you have it. So we're booted in here, and let's go ahead and, I suppose, give it a second to boot up because it is a spinning hard drive, so it does take a little while. And I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit on the screen here, and we'll take a look at a couple of things. First thing I want to take a look at is the screen resolution. I don't really remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's not much. And you can see it is 1024 by 576, which isn't even 1024 by 600. So really not a lot of space on this screen for content, but that's pretty typical for a netbook at the time. Let's go ahead and look at the system properties here real quick. You'll see it's Windows 7 Home Premium. I installed Service Pack 1. And then, you guys remember the Windows Experience Index? Remember when that was a thing? This thing scores a 2.1, which is not great. And apparently it needs to be refreshed, but we're not going to do that. It is an Intel Atom N270. I believe that's the same chip that a lot of these used. There were probably slightly newer versions with newer netbooks, but this one was from late 2009. It runs at 1.6 gigahertz. Of course, it is a single core, single channel, very basic processor. And then we do have 2 gigabytes of RAM, but again, that is single stick, single channel. And then, of course, it's 32-bit. I don't think these Atoms supported more than 2 gigs, so it is maxed out, I believe. If we go over to Speccy, we can get a little bit more of in-depth information on the same thing. And one thing you'll notice real quick as I'm mucking about in the system is that nothing happens on this thing very quickly. It is quite slow and painful to use. But there's the same information with a little bit more technicality to it. We're running at 44 Celsius. I've noticed this thing does run pretty hot when you're trying to do stuff with it. But there you have it. We have the Intel 945 graphics, the integrated graphics. And like I mentioned, it does support Windows Aero, so I guess that's okay. And then we have a 500 gigabyte Seagate hard drive, which I don't believe is original. I think a lot of these came with 250, 160, 250 probably capacity drives, and then you could also get a very rudimentary SSD in these, I believe, which was only 32 gigabytes probably. But there's that. Let's go ahead and open Pale Moon. That is a web browser that is based on Firefox. It's a little bit lighter. It's designed for lower-end systems, but you'll see very shortly that it still does run quite slow. And as a matter of fact, when I first got this thing running and I went to the Dell support website to download drivers, it literally took me over 25 minutes to download 3 files. Every time you clicked on something, it was like a 2-minute wait time for it to load. So that is a bit painful. Text websites work okay. I'll load up Wikipedia here, and although, again, it is very slow, it does work. You can use it. Mostly text-based websites tend to work okay, but there is absolutely no chance of loading any graphically intensive things like YouTube on this thing. It's just not going to happen. Let's see if we can search for something here. I don't know if we're going to be able to. Anyhow, one site that does work really well is FrogFind, and our friends over at Action Retro made this, and it's designed specifically for Windows computers, and it's all, very basic HTML. So if we type in Dell and we search, you can see that tends to work a little bit better, except the server looks to be down at the moment. So I would like to show you that, but that works quite a bit better. And really the moral of the story with this machine is it is pretty much e-waste at this point. There's no way you could actually use this thing for anything. I mean, maybe if you put a Linux distribution on it, it might be a little bit faster, but probably not by a whole lot. These machines were low end for the time when they first came out, and the modern internet is far too much for this very basic machine to handle. So really, it's nothing but a display piece at this point, but that's why I bought it. And there you have it. So there it is, guys. You can see that light lit up too, by the way, because it's connected to a network, so there's that. But there you have it, guys. That's really all I wanted to show you on this one. It's just a quick blast from the past. You know, of course, things like this don't really exist anymore, but there you have it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.